After over 20 years of working in the comic book industry, I've decided to embark on a new adventure. Join me as I explore the strange and unusual, doing everything from sharing my favorite books, comics, and horror movies, to traveling to abandoned spaces, horror-themed bars and restaurants, and all sorts of spooky spots. Welcome to Curious Haunts. I'm your host, Jeremy Haun. Welcome back for a very special episode of Curious Haunts. Since I started this show, I've wanted to occasionally add in an interview segment. Chats with some of my favorite horror creators from comics, prose, film, and more. Now at its heart, Curious Haunts is always going to be about exploration. Travel to bizarre, haunted, and whimsical places to find the strange and unusual. But today, we're going to do something special. I had the opportunity to sit down with one of my oldest friends in comics. You may know Tim Seeley from his love letter to slasher horror, Hack Slash, or from Money Shot, or Local Man. Maybe even from his work on pretty much every major comics character out there, from Nightwing to He-Man, and everything in between. You might also know him from his new sci-fi murder mystery supernatural TV series, Revival, a show based on Tim and Mike Norton's Image Comics series by the same name. Tim is one of my favorite people to talk to. He was gracious enough to invite me to his home bar for a chat. His wonderful and talented wife, Paola, even made us not one, but two absolutely fantastic cocktails. I'm glad I get to share this chat with you. So sit down, pour yourself a drink, and enjoy the Curious Haunts chat with Tim Seeley. And welcome back to Curious Haunts. We're doing something a little different today. I am here with my friend, comic creator, writer, artist, everything, Tim Seeley.
A pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Jeremy.
Yeah.
I like to have you in my house anyway, but then if we can make something, film some shit, and have some drinks, it's even better.
It's actually the best of all the things. So yeah, we're here at Tim's house, and this is an amazing spot. Your house is like the best shrine to art, the icons of our youth,
Yeah.
and horror. It's all
Yeah,
of the best things. I love it.
All of it fused together to be slightly confusing if you're not a nerd. You know, like just all these kind of unrelated seemingly, but they're shared with. I thought it was great in 1987, and now it's here. Like that's the.
Look, I don't want to hang out with anybody that doesn't think this is the best thing ever.
Right, yeah, exactly.
I love all this stuff. You love all this stuff. That's all we need. Yeah.
Love it. And the camera's not capturing the wall of He-Man, so that's important. You're going to see the tiki drinks, the tiki mugs, and the Elvis stuff, and all the booze, but the He-Man guys are over there, so you're missing out.
I think we'll have to probably cut some in.
You'll just do
little
survey.
Some B-roll that's
B-roll,
that's gonna be a lot of fun. So here's the thing. Curious Haunts is me loving things, loving horror, loving comics, loving stories, loving physical media, and those are things that you absolutely love too.
Absolutely.
And part of the joy of what I'm getting to do with this is talk to people that I love. I love their work. I love them as people. And, you and I share a long-standing relationship in this comic book. We've, as far as creators that are working, that are still working, we've known each other forever.
It's 22 years, I think, Jeremy. Maybe 23. Wait, is it 2025? I met you in 2001.
Okay, so yeah, we're actually approaching.
It might have been right before I moved to Chicago. So I actually met you before I moved to Chicago because we did the Wizard World Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You were doing Paradigm.
Yep.
I was doing Love Buddy and Mr. Hell.
Right. And I think that's the thing. Back in those days, we were all scrapping. We were working so hard, just trying to figure out how to get into this thing and do the thing. And I feel like that Wizard World Chicago was kind of a real meeting place for a lot of what we did.
It was like the nexus of the. It was like there was a triangle. It was like Minneapolis, the square really. Minneapolis, down to Kansas City, St. Louis, Chicago. And then over to Cleveland,
right.
Cincinnati, that area. And that square is just sort of if you push all those together, the zit of nerds is Chicago. It's like you in the corner, and then everybody kind of concentrates. So that location was where we'd all end up at the same show.
Yep.
And everybody I still know in comics that isn't an Italian. I met at those shows back in the day. Kirkman, Tony Moore, you, just like Phil Hester, eventually Mitch Gerrits, like all those people were people I met through that Chicago, everybody zitted together.
Oh yeah. Well, and that show was really special in eventually it got kind of ridiculous, but
Yes.
it was special in that time because rather than being like now where C2E2 is in, like downtown,
Yes,
Chicago,
in the
city where you can easily get away and do things. We were kind of cloistered in Rosemont.
Yes, and there was nowhere to go but the single bar in the hotel.
Knuckles.
Knuckles,
Yes.
Knuckles, the sports bar.
It was a sports bar, and we packed it out like you would not believe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was there was Knuckles.
There was nowhere to walk, so it was really just because it was that hotel. It was right across the street from the convention center.
Right.
Like now, there's stuff in Rosemount, which
Right.
tower, but there was nothing. There was Knuckles. Yeah.
And you could go like if you walked a bit. What was the great Mexican place that we all went to?
That is gone, and I can't remember what that
Oh,
was called. Yeah.
like it was. You would make. You'd make the trek
We had to be
there.
cheap. We're cheap.
Right. Oh yeah, we were so poor. Like
Yeah.
that was the treat. That was like if you had like a really good show. Otherwise, like you had like 15 people kick in for pizza. And,
Yes, exactly.
yeah. But and then if you had a really really good show, you go to Jalapele and
Oh, yeah.
and you go to the Tiki Bar and
Halkahiki,
yeah, there you go. Yeah, and
just down River Road.
yeah, and I still love that spot. If there weren't so many cool hip tiki spots in the city now,
In the city, yeah.
I probably would make it because it is a trek whenever like.
Which is funny. You're actually closer now to Halkahiki than you've been ever before because we live down. I mean, it's like 15 minutes from my house.
Sure.
Yeah, so you could.
Well,
now that you're all the way out
damn.
here.
Now that I'm out here, maybe I should. But so the theme of Curious Aunts really is the love of horror. It's I talk constantly. It's about spooky goodness, right?
Spooky goodness.
It's
yeah.
The strange and unusual.
That'll be on your tombstone.
He'll
He'll be back for spooky goodness.
And now for more spooky goodness, Jeremy's corpse. I realize that as we get older, the things that we love, the nostalgia takes on a whole other level.
Yeah, for sure.
And you've always been just an unabashed lover of nostalgia. Your love of He-Man, of 80s horror, of weird sci-fi and funky stuff. What is it about horror that keeps you coming back just time and again?
Oh man, I mean, I think that I always come back to this sort of idea that I think what horror does. We have a delivery. Special
Oh my
delivery,
goodness!
Jeremy.
All right.
Or site.
Whichever.
Come on behind us so that you don't get in
come
the
around.
camera,
We can say hi.
This is my lovely wife Paola delivering a drink. Paola, what is the name of this cocktail?
COVID.
The COVID. Delicious.
I love
Did
this.
during COVID. Wow, baby, you really went for a presentation.
This is gorgeous.
This is
Thank you
beautiful.
so much.
It's gonna take up the whole shot.
I love that. I love that we're like halfway through this one and getting another one.
I'm not halfway.
Can
through.
Can I move in? Can I just go ahead and?
Yeah, just.
I'm gonna live here from now on.
This basement can be yours.
This is going to. I'll just sleep right there and.
Of course.
Yeah, this is fantastic. Thank you so
Well,
much.
cheers. Giant
Cheers.
crazy drink.
Yeah.
Cheers, wife.
Cheers.
All right.
There you go.
There we go.
So horror. I was talking about horror. So I was an anxious kid. It's so good. Damn, baby. That is one real good one.
Yeah, hey, these are my COVID.
Your COVID drink. The
Specialty.
COVID specialty.
If this came out of that, I'm not gonna say it's worth it, but I am gonna say that that is a high point.
That's yes.
Thank you so much.
Lockdown experimentation.
My
Perfect.
pleasure.
But for me, horror was because I was like an anxious kid, like we didn't know what that shit was. It would just be called like twitchy or something.
Right.
But like, I was kind of like I worry about my mom going to work at Kmart at night, and so I got obsessed about these ideas that she would get a car accident and all this stuff. So I was like this really like obsessive, nervous kid. And when I started sneaking in and seeing like horror movies that my dad was watching, I'd be horrified. My dad was a big, big, big horror fan. Like, the hugest B movie.
Okay.
Anything with a monster, like that was my dad. And my bedroom was near my dad's movie room. So I would go to bed at night and I would hear like, Predator and, like just screaming and Black Christmas.
Right,
with all this stuff going on. And it would like, in a weird way, that was comforting because it was controlled.
Right.
And there's a thing about, I think, being a human is terrifying.
Right.
You are a sentient blob of cells that knows it will die. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's all these other things on Earth that don't know they will die.
Right.
Like they're driven, but they don't know. Like, oh God, someday it'll be the over, and it'll be oblivion for eternity. Right. And I think like humans, knowing that sort of it changes everything about, and maybe it's why we shouldn't exist. Like we're a mistake. But if you sort of become aware of that, the control of watching a horror movie, experiencing some existential dread or some terror about the end of your life, and then you get scared, you get freaked out, and then at the end, click off. It's over.
It's over.
And then I think in a way like the control that it always gave was such a charge. I think as a kid, and horror movies helped my anxiety, which at the time I thought was weird, but now I've been to horror conventions for 30 years, and I'm like, nope, that's all of them. Right. I mean, it's like there's a reason that like now like Art the Clown is popular. It's because all these sort of like kids, these Gen Zers with anxiety are like, I get it. I go to the movie theater, I scream, then I laugh, then the movie's over, and we go out for pizza.
Yeah. For me, it was, I had a pretty similar situation. I was scared of everything, and there was a lot of change in my preteen life and a lot of upheaval and not knowing where life was going to lead. And being scared of everything, I eventually had to decide that I was just going to face it.
Yeah.
I similarly, like I would hear, my aunt was 5 years older than I was, and so I was, 10 and 11 years old, and I would hear them watching, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 downstairs or something like that.
The really gay one.
Yeah. That's yeah, it kind of makes so much sense, like when you catch it. Yeah. But hearing that stuff, see, for you it was comforting. That made it worse for me. That actually, like hearing it, because that imagination then kicks in, and you're imagining that every moment of that movie is the most terrifying aspect.
Oh, that's interesting. Your imagination was better and scarier than when you actually watched
it.
Right,
absolutely. It really, like it was worse. And so for me, the comfort point was actually finally putting in, like the one that really, and I saw other stuff kind of, but like the one that was my choice under my control was Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, The Dream Warriors.
Oh, Jesus. One of my favorite movies of all time.
It is, and
it's X-Men versus Freddy.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I feel like there's a lot of things that sort of influenced that story. You've got everything from like Dreamscape and stuff like that sort of played into it.
Yeah.
But that one for me, and I think it was them being able to fight back. But I got to see him die.
Yeah.
Because when you only hear him laugh, when you only hear people screaming, it's infinite, right?
Oh, that's interesting.
But I get to see the monsters die. And then out of that, I started watching every horror movie, A to Z, and my local, because I was not parented. But I watched every horror film, and then I went from seeing them die and taking comfort in that to actually getting excited about the monsters themselves and really loving, and then
you start to, and that's also part of the control, right? Because then you're like, I like the monsters,
right?
And the monsters in the movies are not nearly as scary as the monsters in the real world. Like after a certain point, you were enthused by their appearance, and like you were along for the ride. You're in on the joke, which I think is important.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that getting to control that, and then learning that, like, oh, they look cool, I want to draw the monsters, and getting getting into special effects and learning how they made the arm get chopped off, or like
Dude,
that.
yes.
It was my favorite stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think there's, and a lot because of horror movies, because they tend to be it's a physical sort of thing, that it involves special effects.
Right.
That those things are almost always connected as art kids and horror movies, right? Because you can see in a horror movie to some degree once you're the kid who's watched Dream Warriors for 6 times.
Right.
You sit down and you start to go like, oh, they had to make the giant roach suit that the girl wears, and then and so you start to get interested in the process, which I think it's also true of that of like horror comics, which I also loved as a kid, because my dad would go buy like a Vampirella magazine or something like that, and then he would read it, and then he would just give it to me, and I was like 9 or something,
Right.
and it would have like a Vampirella story and then like some horror story,
Right.
And part of the joy of those was like, I could see the storytelling in a superhero story, obviously, but in a horror comic, there's more about the process. They're using shadows, they're obscuring things. Like, I think in my young mind, I was able to see, oh, this is something made a little quicker than I did with a superhero comic, which I think, those superhero comics were so, especially like a Marvel DC book, mostly except for like Kirby or something, were pretty standardized.
Right.
Like, but in the horror comics, though, it'd be Esteban Maroto.
Right.
It would be like, something would be really lush and whatever, and then this one would be really minimalist, and some of them would be really ugly.
Right,
And like I think that also, that imagination thing, I do think, a thing I think about a lot with horror is the reason, partially also I think I loved horror, was that when you left that movie, it would give you thoughts. You would start imagining things, right? You would start thinking about scenarios, and like horror is so definitely connected to your imagination.
Right. Absolutely.
And it's like a quicker, to this day, obviously I love superheroes and barbarians and all the other shit that I grew up on, but horror was the direct connection to your deepest imagination.
Right.
Because it relied on you imagining some of these things to make it scary.
Right.
Like some of the stuff we didn't show.
Right.
And it was better that way. Like you think about, like, when I first saw Alien, I remember how much it was about what you were imagining, because you hardly ever see the monster in that one, And so, like, it relies on creativity, which I think is also what keeps that nexus of horror, art, process. All those things are sort of tied together,
I absolutely agree. I think that horror is such a transformative medium. It's looking at the world looking at the world around us, personalizing it, and because then we just run with it, and it's fantastic.
And it's not only it personalizes because it's about you,
Right.
but it's also unifying.
Right.
Because you can see something and that scared the shit out of you.
Right.
And you can share that with someone else. Like maybe someone else, doesn't have, like, death by fire terrifies them as much as something else,
Right.
or the edge thing is more scary.
Right.
Or whatever this sort of, mortal fear that you have. You get to all jump together, hold hands, scream. It's like, it makes it a community experience.
Right.
Which the only other film type that is like that, or comic story, or whatever else is like this, is comedy.
Right.
So it's like those two things are the ones you share with people. Like when you don't have, often with your kid, you don't have a bunch of friends over and you watch like Terms of Endearment.
Right. No, absolutely.
Yeah. But you sit down and watch a horror movie or a comedy. Ideally, both.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is why to this day I cannot get past Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness, right? Because like, Fright Night, like those things to me, when I saw that and I realized like, I can watch this with my friends and we can laugh and we can be scared and we don't tell each other we're scared about this. We can definitely laugh about that.
Right.
Like, it's so, and I'm not I'm not antisocial. Like I like hanging out with people. So like that was such a part of horror too, which I think about all the time. When you go to a screening of a horror movie, like you are in it with your crowd.
Right. Absolutely.
It is totally okay to yell at the fucking screen when you are watching a horror movie. And, in a way that it wouldn't be to do in something else.
Absolutely, yeah. Some of my, and you're hitting on two things. Watching a horror film in your basement, clicking on the TV, putting in a movie, and just experiencing it, like that is perfection. And also, watching something in a theater, like
It's perfection.
those two things are sort of the best feelings. You can feel the tension and the release of tension. I saw Scream, the first Scream, in an amazingly packed Friday night release.
I did too. We have a poster right there in the mall. I had the same experience with Scream. It was so weird to remember how rare that was in like 1993 or whatever.
Well, because everything was terrible. Like up until that moment.
Yeah.
And I mean, Wes Craven. I miss the man dearly. Wes Craven, in that opening, did something that we hadn't seen, I would argue, in 15 years at that point.
Oh, dude. I mean, I think about how Scream, and obviously Hack Slash and the Scream connection is so obvious.
Right.
But I remember I went to see that with my girlfriend, and we ran to get good seats to see Scream.
Right.
It was an event. It was a moment, and part of it is it made horror hip again.
Right.
Which I think now you get kind of used to how the horror cycle works, but at the time it was sort of like, and obviously people were making good horror movies but that one made it. It reminded you that it was for young people,
Right.
and that it could be sexy. It did two things that we forgot.
Right.
Which
Oh,
I think
absolutely.
was fucking great.
Well, it was for everybody again. Like I think that was the first time, because you're right. Like there was still good horror. Like then there's always been good horror, and even
because before that we got the Francis Ford Coppola Dracula.
Right.
We got all kinds of cool shit before that.
I think that it became something absolutely for the masses again. I think it became. Rather than being, because I mean, again, you're right. Like Dracula was a perfect film. I absolutely love it.
Think about it all the time.
But I watch it all the time.
Yeah, me too. I read the Mike Mignola adaptation of the comics with Roy Thomas all the time.
It's amazing. Even while it is not the truest to.
Totally, it's true.
Well, I do a tangent here, but like, I feel like I would be not true to a friend of mine if I actually didn't point out that it needs to be called Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula instead of Bram Stoker's Dracula, because he took some real liberties that I love.
It was closer though than the Bela Lugosi Dracula.
But yes, it absolutely was. And but like the just the vibe of it, just the costume design alone, and the creature design,
opulent,
sexy. And it was sexy, and but taking it back to
Godzilla. Jeez, I'm working on Godzilla too. Dracula is about fucking.
Yeah,
and it knew that. Godzilla's not about fucking.
I mean,
Dracula's about fucking.
If Godzilla was, I think we'd have a whole different,
very different culture.
Yeah, just absolutely. And that's, I think that even now, recently getting the Nosferatu remake and seeing like how disturbing and gross and sexy something can be. It's an understanding of what vampires are and what Dracula is. But taking it back to Scream, I think that that so much of Dracula, accents aside, was about art. It was about the glorious spectacle of film.
Yeah.
And and Scream was like, no, this is for everybody, and it's sexy, and it's fun, and it's young, and it's hip, and we're going
But it references old shit. So it did that thing where you could see that movie on multiple levels, I mean, when I saw that movie, that changed my brain. That movie, because I'd grown up on slash movies for sure, and Black Christmas and Halloween and all that sort of stuff. But it was like one of those, it felt, and not in a bad way, but it felt seedy and kind of like you weren't supposed to do this. You know what I mean?
Right.
And when you go see Scream and you realize that everyone was sitting down in the basement watching those seedy movies,
right,
waiting for someone to make it in the light,
right,
which is also a huge advantage of how Scream is shot. Some of the murders happen just in the middle of the day,
right.
So it's about dragging this sort of seediness into this WBCW teen, modern '90s teen thing. And it's crazy also because when I teach my college stuff, the movies that hang on are always amazing to me because some of them are so completely forgotten. But one that is not forgotten at all by Gen Zers, fucking Scream. It holds up in a way that they still watch that shit.
And it is completely watchable. I mean, you know,
So
one of the great things, you know, the revival that it's had recently, and it's been good. But the revival, I got to share that with my boys,
yeah.
and we sat down and watched every single one of them, and with the ups and downs. But like the first one and a lot of the second one,
Killer.
hold
You
up.
get Killer Timmy Elephant, I'm in.
Yeah,
Bro,
yeah,
I was saying, that movie, if it's 90% good, but also Timmy the Elephant,
Right.
that's 100% good on my mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I support that. So, so taking it back to comics, you know, I mean, like I said, we've worked in this crazy industry for 25 years,
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
and we keep coming back.
Yeah.
What is it for you about horror in comics that is truly special?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, I love horror comics as much as I love horror novels and horror film, and honestly a little bit more.
Right.
And I think of the things I love so much in horror comics. Going back to those Vampirella magazines I read. I love so much. When I was a kid, you could get EC Comics reprints. Marvel Horror, which is such a unique, special brand. When they were doing Dracula and Man Thing and Werewolf by Night and how those feel. They feel like something different. It's so great. Chaos Comics for me was huge. Ernie Evil Ernie and all that sort of metal horror.
Right.
So horror is very able. Comics is a visual medium.
Right.
Horror can absolutely rely on visuals to work.
Right.
And in comics, you can't do jump scares and some other sort of things. But what you can do really well is visual horror and implied horror.
Right.
So I think I go back to like what I loved as a kid, and you would read like when Vertigo first came out, all their books were horror. Even if they were a superhero book, they were horror.
Right.
Animal Man and Shade the Changing Man and obviously the Alan Moore take on Swamp Thing,
Right.
which became Jamie Dono or Mark Miller or those guys doing those sort of stories. It was an implied horror, what you didn't see. And I think what makes horror work in comics so much is that in comics, we rely on you for the story about half the time.
Right.
Because there's a panel, and between that is the gutter.
Right.
And in the gutter is what I rely on you to put in there, right? So as a reader, you've got to, and hopefully if I did a good job, you'll pick the right thing.
Right.
But it's going to be it's going to be colored by your perception.
Right. Absolutely.
So in the gutter is you and me, but we're doing this together. And in horror, if I do that and make you put yourself into that, it is going to work even better than film, right? Because and I think it's some of the scariest shit I've ever read, or ever seen or ever experienced. Some percentage of that is actually comics before film or novels, because of what we've just shared. You just made me go through that. And you think like how Alan Moore would do that in Swamp Thing, because Swamp Thing is ostensibly a superhero story, but the things that were horrifying about it was the things that you had to just sit with.
Oh, yeah.
And you think of Anatomy Lesson and like how terrifying the Anatomy Lesson is.
Right.
It's a sort of slasher story set in this superhero world, or the existential dread of Animal Man, or you are putting this in to the story, and then now it's on you. The degree of which you've invested is how much you get back. And so that is, I think, an incredible strength of comics, and why the two major mediums of comic books, when it really comes down to it, are superhero and horror. Right? Horror has transcended as long as superheroes have.
Absolutely.
And it keeps coming back. It keeps working in comics. And if you do it right, I think you can, superheroes work because it relies on bombastic visual, and horror works because it relies on the shared experience of the gutter.
Right.
And like the some of the worst and sort of like most disturbing things I've experienced as a reader and fan of horror have come from those comics. I always think of like, you know, when or Sandman, you know, and anything Grant Morrison, and just how he could just Peter Milligan, like they draw you in, and you've got the comfort of these bright visuals, and then they nail you with the fucking existential dread in that fucking narrow band of white.
Yeah. No,
It's
absolutely.
amazing.
There are moments in Invisibles
Yeah.
that I still think about as pure horror, and it's just
Absolutely.
you know, it stands out. You know, and look, and I think it's interesting because I think that me talking about my experience as a kid and what that did, and because look, I was laying in bed hearing Freddy or Jason or whomever slash their way through, you know, a group
Whatever,
of nubile
The year,
teens,
right?
Yeah, I was filling in the gutters. And
Oh, that's interesting.
I
You
was
were having a comic book experience.
I was having a comic book experience
That's amazing.
as a kid watching those films, and I think that there is so much strength to that. I think that our imagination does more for horror. You know, like the heavy lifting, you know, is really done in the mind. I think about, you know, in prose stories. I mean,
Lovecraft.
you know, well,
Yeah,
I mean, so like Lovecraft calling something undescribable.
Yeah.
You know, like suddenly you fill in those gaps.
You try.
And you want to. I mean, like,
It's such a genius idea because it just says a completely like, you know, he's trying to tell you, I can't tell to you, you're going to need to work on it. And then you start working on it, and you come up with something in your mind that is tailored to you.
right. Well, and like, you know, like he gave just enough hint, just enough description
Yeah.
that your brain did, again, filled in the gutters.
Yeah. It's all about the gutters.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah. That's amazing. And a lot of things with you know, very specific to all these things is they're taking advantage of their particular medium. So Lovecraft had just words, so he knows what to give you that you'll fill in. Comics, we have words and pictures, but we don't have motion and sound.
Right.
So we're going to give you this.
Right.
And film we have motion and sound, and we have all these other things, but we only have 2 hours to give it to you.
Right.
Right? So, because you're not going to sit in a theater for 6.5 hours or 8 hours or 2 weeks, you know? So, everybody gets their medium and they get the good things, that are the advantages and the disadvantages.
Right.
And so then you go in and you experience it, and hopefully the creator of that particular medium took advantage of the thing that they were good at, you know? And that's why the ones that last, they know what what they're experiencing here, you know?
Absolutely, and I think that if you look at us here now after all this time, I mean, you know, I think you come to terms with the fact that you're kind of good at this, you know, like
Sure.
eventually, but you also just realize that like we've done this time and again, we've figured out how this story thing works, what we need to do and what we want to do,
Yeah.
you know. So I'm curious.
Like, not a cocky way. But in a like, in a
No,
way
it's
of
a
like,
cocky way. Yeah, it's completely. Yeah, like we can be a little. No, okay.
I'm real good at horror. I know that.
I'm okay at horror. Yeah, I'm all right. I'm right.
You're doing all right.
I'm catching on. So for you, what's the thing? Like even now, what scares you?
Oh, fuck, man, so much. I mean, the thing that scares the shit out of me most, and this is gonna be a little bit political, but it's this sort of idea that humans have no choice but to eventually destroy themselves. This like watching how everything goes, and even, you know, you and I grew up in the sort of, you know, in the 80s, which we were dealing with the fear of it, constant nuclear annihilation. And that's not nothing. Right. But we kind of felt like, hey, that was done. In the 90s, we were like, hey, yeah, man, all right. And the sad shit probably is that, like, sort of culturally and comfort-wise, we probably peaked in, like, 1997 or something. And then every time since then is people just keep choosing the worst fucking thing to try to like, make their lives worse because they just can't imagine stability if they have to share it with other people.
Right.
Like, really, that scares the fuck out of me. This human nature that I keep, like, because I'm an optimist, but at heart, but I keep seeing people do the thing that I just thought that they got by, and it just shocks me. And that horror and the sort of like the thing, what scares me, and I don't want to get too grim about it, but what makes a zombie story work, or what makes is man's inhumanity to man, right? Like a zombie story isn't about the zombies, at all. It is about how, in the face of an impending horror, we turn on each other. That's the fucking story. That's what makes a zombie story scary. A slasher movie is about being punished for who you are, being punished for your own sexual expression by a some sort of completely evangelical hardcore in the form of Michael Myers. This sort of this, you're punished for being who you are. And those things keep coming up because we keep fucking doing it.
Right, absolutely.
And we're now in, why is horror going to have a real good ride in the next couple of years? Because a lot of people are fucking scared.
Right.
Why? Because they're who they are, or because, man's humanity, because faced with the threat to the economy, people would rather kill each other than fucking solve it or be poor or whatever. Right. And that shit scares the shit out of me.
Right. No, I mean, and that makes perfect sense. I find that as those of us who work in this industry and think about these things constantly, it's that stuff. It's recently on an episode of Curious Haunts, I actually talked about one of my favorite films, The Devil's Backbone.
Oh yeah, Jesus.
Guillermo del Toro
Civil War, Spanish Civil War.
At his best. And one of my favorite things, time and again, Del Toro examines that the monsters are part of the story, but
part of the story,
but the humans are the real monsters.
Absolutely. That's Romero, right? Man, Romero was always that. To some degree, Lovecraft. All these people.
He was also kind of a piece of shit.
Well, he was a racist.
Yeah.
That's a wholly different thing.
But yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that it's always an examination of humanity amidst something. I mean, we saw Kirkman do it expertly, in modern horror storytelling. Time and again, I know that there's the moment where he literally says, "We
are the Walking
Dead." Yeah, but there's so much truth.
Well, that dehumanization, that sort of idea, and here's the other side of this. I think about it sometimes is that Walking Dead or going back to Night of the Living Dead, they sort of preempt a dehumanization that follows, and the sense that George Romero had, or the sense that Robert and Tony had, was that people were starting to turn on each other. Yeah. It's not a huge sort of coincidence that book coming out in the early 2000s after we'd have this sort of, and I can't believe I have to say this about the 90s, but relative American social calm, and then that was sort of fucked up for obviously 2001 with 9/11. But then you kind of, the arrival of Barack Obama, radicalizes and crazifies these fucking worst people. And it's all about this idea that, in a weird way, Robert and Tony saw that coming, and Romero saw that coming, the rise of the civil rights movement. Right. He saw that would lead to dehumanization, right? To some degree, because a certain amount of people would feel threatened by this sort of, that we're putting a face on everyone. Yeah. And they wanted to react to that by being like, no, it's a faceless horde coming for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
That's probably kind of dark.
No. You know what? I think that one of the things about what we do, it's fun to talk about all the good things. Yeah. And I'll ask a silly question as we round this out. But I want to talk about this stuff too, and I think we need to. Yeah. I think that an understanding of who we are as creatives, where we're coming from.
You don't tell a story about nothing.
Well, and the reality of it is that we're talking about people. We're talking
Yeah.
like
The stories are about
the best horror stories. You know, I don't care what it is. I've said this a few times, but like, I want the couple that's on their way across. They're moving across the United States. She knows that she's going to have a baby,
Yeah.
and she can't tell him.
Yeah.
And then axe wielding maniacs hop out. If you do it right, you care about, is she going to tell him
Yeah.
about
The thing that
that?
you would actually relate to.
And I think that like these stories are about humanity.
Oh, 100%.
And-
And it's often about little things. You know, and the bigger things act as the metaphor for the little thing.
And we get to play with that. And I love, as creatives and as fans of this genre, that we get to experience it time and time again.
Yeah.
a
And
special
unfortunately, we have to experience it time and time again because things don't get fixed. You know what I mean? Like, we always come back to I mean, I don't know if you remember the French film Martyrs, which was like this sort of,
Wow.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm so horrified by that movie, and it's like this Nazi, you know, the sort of far right thing rises up and all this shit, and well, there we go. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's this, it's this preemptive. We're trying to warn you, and you don't listen to
Right.
us.
Right.
It's just,
Right.
yeah, it's crazy, man.
Yeah. Well, and you know, the beautiful thing about it is that I do feel like that horror is something that you also can take what you want from it. I don't think people always take all the things that
Yeah, you wish
we,
they would.
you know, like I to a degree, I wish that maybe they would sometimes take more from it. But
Yeah.
you know, we'll be we'll be fine. We'll be fine. All right. So I guess before we wrap up, last question I have is a real silly one.
Okay, sure.
All right. So you get a one of those old school portable DVD players.
Okay.
All right.
All right, I got one. Okay.
The kind that you flip it up, it had the screen, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
Travel DVD player.
Absolutely.
What 5 films do you take into the bunker with you?
That's a great question. Okay. All right, I can walk through this. All right, I'm definitely going to bring RoboCop. Not just pure nostalgia. Also, it's a movie every time I watch it, I discover something else in it.
Right,
It's
right.
just fucking incredible. And also, it's you know, a little bit of prescience, I think, is great about it. And it's so visceral. Okay, so I'm bringing RoboCop. Halloween, the first Halloween. I'm bringing Halloween.
Perfect.
I'm going to bring The Apartment.
Okay.
Because I think about that movie all the time, just how like it's so ahead of its time and its ability to sort of connect to you on a kind of like they were living. It's you know, it's a 40s 50s sort of era movie, and it's still like really honest,
Right.
which I really love about that movie, and I think about it all the time. You know, man, I'm a little ashamed about it, but I can just watch this movie fucking constantly. Heat.
Yeah. Okay.
Michael Mann's Heat. I don't know, man. Just something about that movie that is just so, like, it is so over the top. It's kind of goofy,
Right.
but it is so loving. And every time you watch it, you're like, why is Pacino doing this?
Right.
Why is this? So it's like straightforward yet completely chaotic.
Uh-huh.
I love that about that movie. And I'm probably gonna bring, you know, the original Creature from the Black Lagoon. I just think it's it's terrifying, but it's like, I could also show it to my daughter if we're on
Right.
the same island
Right.
stuck together.
Right.
Like, she's gonna be like, Dad, what you know?
Right.
Well, you're gonna watch something scary, but we're on a desert island, so I don't know if this is
Right.
gonna go. But Creature from the Black Lagoon is so, it's emotional, it's scary, it's sweet in a weird way,
yeah.
it's romantic.
Yeah.
There's something, yeah. So does that give me fun? And the design of the creature is one of
The
the
design
finest.
and designed by a woman.
Designed by a lady.
I love it.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of like all the things, the elements that made that movie. It's really ahead of its time in so many ways.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a secret theory that that Creature from the Black Lagoon is actually a like kind of nod to Lovecraft too. I think that.
Oh, I think so.
He's
Obviously,
he's a deep
Shadow
one.
over Innsmouth.
Yeah, you know, he's a deep one. And,
for sure.
And
You know.
yeah,
But I mean, you know, Lovecraft was picking up that sort of like
Right.
when you live on the coast, part of your fear is all, you know, something's coming from up there, right? Right, and that is something that I think they kind of picked up with Creature from like, you know, obviously they were in like 12 feet of water.
Right.
The fear of Lovecraft shit is like a mile deep in a goddamn giant squid head.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm so glad we did this. I mean, I look, this entire episode is an experiment. This is actually just.
Well, most people that you interview aren't going to have a home bar, so.
No, I mean, I kind of I'm gonna only interview people with home bars.
There we go.
The idea that you go and have their partners like
brew you cocktails.
Honestly, you've ruined me. You and Paola have ruined me. I don't know what I'm gonna do now.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, guys. I'm sorry. This is on you. Now you just got to go buy a house in Chicago with a cop bar in the basement from 1964. That's on you.
Yeah, but this has been fantastic. I mean, you're one of my favorite people. I one of my longest standing relationships in comics. Yeah. And all I ever want is more of your voice in comics.
Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate it.
There's people, over the years we've talked so much about independent comics and why we keep coming back to this. Well, we've done so much other stuff.
Yeah.
But
right, 'cause we gotta pay for our bar basement.
Right. Yeah. But the reality of it is that whether it's Hack Slash or Loaded Bible, I love Loaded Bible, or a revival, like so many things that you do, you keep coming back to things that you want to say about the world around us. And
sure.
And there's
unfortunate or fortunate, yeah.
Well, yeah, and look, I mean, I think one of another thing is one of my favorite things about you is that you're ridiculous, just as ridiculous as I am. You unabashedly love all this stuff. Yeah, well, and that's and that's the other thing. Really, to be honest, we all basically kind of look alike. We're just versions of sort of the same person.
How did the hat become our uniform?
I don't know. I honestly, we need to convince Cullen Bunn to grow a beard because he's part of our hat club.
And we need Jason Aaron to agree to hat.
Yes.
He's got the beard.
Yeah. And Cullen
Tom King, he could use a hat and a beard.
Yeah. He could. He's
got the bald head.
Yeah, but he's mostly staying in his superhero espionage fantasy kind of thing.
Once he writes another horror comic.
If we're gonna get another horror comic out of him, we're gonna he's gonna need the glasses, the hat, a beard, or something.
Can't wait. Yeah. Perfect.
Tim, thanks so much for doing this with me.
Oh, my pleasure.
I
man.
appreciate you.
And thank you all for watching us. Thank you.
All right, one of those.
Oh, look at this.
All right.
On-screen hug.
Pop you in the head. All right. See you later. I had an amazing time chatting with Tim. He's one of my favorite people. Be sure and check out Revival over on Syfy. I absolutely love the comic and can't wait to check out the show myself. Now, you might be wondering, what's next? Well, next up, we're headed to Kansas City for a spooky double feature in the heart of the Midwest. And then it's off to see the stranger side of Chicago, Illinois. It's going to be a hell of a spooky time. And I can't wait to share it with all of you. So that's it for episode 8 of Curious Haunts. If you have a weird, wonderful, spooky place you feel like I should visit, please let me know. And if you'd like to join me on this curious and haunting journey, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you know a fellow traveler who, like you, is drawn to the strange and unusual, I'd appreciate you sharing Curious Haunts with them. I'll see you again in 2 weeks. Cheers.